Welcome everybody to the Movement is Medicine show. We have a exceptional show lined up today. We have a special guest and you are going to love her. Janice, welcome to the show. You are a chiropractor, you are an influence coach, a speaker. You found some incredible to inspire women, just to name a few cool things that you've done. You're a coach, you create change in people's lives, you manifest success, and we're super excited to have you on the show. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And of course, we have our head-to-toe team. So Dr. Annie, Dr. Ash, Dr. Lee, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks, Barry.
So let's get started. Since Janice, you're our special guest, and we want to spend some time getting to know you. Why don't you give us maybe the quick, the 30-second overview on how you help, where what you're doing, where you're at, and kind of give our listeners an understanding a little bit about what you're doing out there in the world.
Yeah, I'd love to. My background is a chiropractor. I actually came from the traditional medical side, pivoted, was headed into medical school, did the 180 into chiropractic. Love health, well-being, wellness, and pretty quickly found that it's not just about the physical work that a chiropractor is involved with, or that side of the sort of doctor-patient relationship, that a lot of it was all about a patient's mindset. And before you know it, I began to coach and really teach my patients. That's what had me delve into training as a coach, a personal and professional coach. And I've chosen to apply that in a lot of different ways through different businesses, different ideas, companies, opportunities. Ended up sort of a director of investments for a biotech startup. But really, the core of it all came from this idea about mindset work. So that's where my love is continued to be, talking to patients, talking to practitioners, helping people with their mindset, because what we think is what we create.
So I love that. I 100% agree with it. So it sounds to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like they're lurking here. Maybe there's a aha story or a breakthrough story or an origin story. How did you come into this? Because I think all of us would agree mindset matters and how we think about things matters. But you're talking about an even more profound and maybe deeper realization that I'm wondering, did that come from a personal experience, a breakthrough? Was there a key moment, maybe in a series of patient-doctor relationships, where you realized the differentiating factor between health and and wellness and not was mindset was a kind of a key piece? But give us a little bit of that aha story. What's that background story?
Yeah, I think two things happened. One was personal, the other was with patients in my practice. The personal one was that as a young practitioner, I had nothing but debt. I had overhead trying to figure out how to run a practice. Chiropractic is out of the traditional system. So you're dealing with basically being a small business person. And, just all that goes behind that, it's just a lot of stress. And I personally went off to do sort of a personal growth experience. And the person facilitating it had me do things like write down my, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, and 10 year goals. And so often as we go through those kinds of experiences, you do it and then you come back into your real life, you put all that stuff on the shelf. How I know it was 2 years later that I was looking at that is because I'd obviously had my notes. I had my notes from the lectures. I had my journal that I'd written all those things in. And 2 years later, we were moving from where we lived. And as instead of packing boxes, I'm doing anything to avoid it. So I start reading it. And the aha moment for that piece of it personally was that 2 years later, I'd basically accomplished every one of my 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, and about 40 to 50% of my 10-year goals. So my brain went to, just imagine if I'd ever paid attention to them. So it was interesting because that was now just a few years into my practice. And then linking that with the practice, many of us as practitioners can describe that, how is it that a patient that has what we consider this unbelievably severe case, all of a sudden we start to work with them, and just with certain things that we're doing and the guidance along the way, they're making spectacular gains. Versus someone that it may appear that it's like a more minor case and they are not getting well. They are not making changes. And because of my multiple degrees, I was having a lot of really intense cases referred to me. I had orthopedic surgeons that were sending me people pre-surgery, post-surgery, and it was just so revealing to me that less was about the physical reality, their condition, a surgery or not a surgery, or their signs and symptoms, and a lot more of it was based on who they were as people. So it's like the personal and the professional were all kind of playing out together. And that really started me on this trajectory. Like, how did I help people understand? How did I empower patients? And a lot of times it was asking them questions that no one else had asked them. And so that's sort of the focus of coaching in people's lives, whether it's on a personal level, a professional level, is just often asking questions that make people dig a little deeper. And the coach doesn't do anything really for you. The coach just reveals you. So that's like with the patients, I just began to then, way before it was the norm, I began to put on workshops and bring speakers into my clinic. And I became like a hub. My practice was a hub in a community for them finding answers for themselves. So that's kind of how it was both personal and professional.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Janice. I mean, I remember so vividly when I first heard you speak at a chiropractic event in Florida. And quite frankly, I had been a little bit disappointed in the event. It was very a lot of selling and not really my thing. And then you stood up on the stage and started talking straight to my heart. And it was just fascinating. Just you really directly asked me how was I going to create change in my practice for my patients and for myself? It was very profound.
Right. Now I can kind of hear you. I'm losing that volume a little bit, so I'm not sure about your speaker. So I think it might be your mic, but just for the listeners, where Annie and I met was at an event that I was speaking, and again, she came right up to me after, and it's because often, in asking a lot of questions as a coach, whether it's for someone like Dr. Annie based on her practice, whether it's you as an individual asking you questions about your health and well-being, like it does, like when you're ready for hearing or ready for change, it really activates you.
It's interesting. I think that when we're talking about coaching and we're talking about mindset, I think such a powerful point you bring out is the use of questions to both focus the mind, focus our intentionality, focus, and then also, as you mentioned, to go deeper and to reveal some of the underlying maybe misconceptions, misbeliefs, maybe stories that we've told ourselves that just aren't true anymore, or maybe never were true, or perspectives that we have that aren't really serving us that well. And that with some shifts and with some of those powerful questions, you can create that type of a breakthrough moment where you realize maybe something that you held to be true was not true, or maybe limitations you had imposed on yourself weren't in effect real, so you actually could do quite a bit more than you anticipated. And
right.
I also love
the perfect example of that, Barry, and sorry to jump in, but I think because this is really important for anyone health-wise to listen to, it's that kind of question of, even a lot of people, well, aches and pains are normal, or, that by a certain age, there's a lot of things we can't do. And the question I want people to think about is, well, who taught us that? It's just something that has become this convention. Well, let's compare that to, there's what's called blue zones, where these are regions that on average people are living to 100 plus years old. And these aren't, homes that they're in. These are thriving communities, that these are people still doing a lot of things that we always were told just didn't happen for somebody to be 100 and 102. So that's the exact thing you're describing. Like, who taught us those habits or patterns or beliefs? And we've taken them on. And so sometimes it's just saying, is it really time to take a look at those and maybe think differently?
Mhm. Now, Lee, I want to kick it over to you. Lee works with a lot of professional, semi-professional athletes, and of course, we know how much mindset factors into athletic performance as well. And like in anything, and I think Janice, as you were framing up, my mindset and clarity of purpose, goals, all of these things really can apply across so many. They apply across all aspects of our life. But Lee, as Janice is talking through some of these coaching elements, what is your perspective on some of this from a mindset standpoint? From a coach standpoint, health standpoint, working kind of in the pro, semi-pro athletic field?
Yeah, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, Janice. It's we're not necessarily talking about like a psychosomatic thing, like you're thinking yourself into pain, as much as we're talking about the mindset of creating the environment to heal and or perform.
Right.
So I agree with that 100%. I mean, we see this stuff in the office all the time. We see it on the field. We see something holding, whether it's a patient or an athlete, back. It could be a mindset thing. It could be a habit that they have, something physical, mental, or emotional. And oftentimes, like, in order to overcome that, you, like Janice was saying, you have to draw attention to that. You have to ask them questions. But like your job as a practitioner, and like my mindset on it is, especially like with patients, is that like we're not the ones doing the healing as much as we're just drawing attention to what needs to be healed.
Right.
So the same thing can be said for performance, right? Like you can substitute healing for running faster or like lifting more or this, whatever your personal goal is. And I'm 100%, I believe that like the mindset is entirely, that's like the most important part of the environment for healing to occur. But also for like us to just attain our goals and like perform, like Janice was saying.
Yeah, and like what Dr. Lee experiences working with athletes really understand this. And like, number one, they know how to feel and listen to their body differently, particularly when they train at that higher level, like anything, even like fairly strong high school athletes, like you just watch them in action. And so they come into a Dr. Lee or the semi-pro or the professional athletes, and a lot of times they're looking for like little health distinctions. They're already really well trained. They want to overcome injuries that you or I might not even be aware of yet, but they're like, no, something's going on. That joint, that movement doesn't feel right. And so, first of all, Dr. Lee is able to amazingly assess someone like that, really help make some distinctions that way. But number one, put their mind at ease and go, yeah, absolutely, here's what's going on. And then delve into a lot of, well, wait a minute, like, here's how your body works and how you can even maximize that. So that's where, head to toe is, from my perspective, such a unique model. It's a rehabilitative model, but again, that's not even the right language for it. Like, it's a empowering model. It's addressing how do you move, how does everything function with your nervous system running and directing that. That's why these athletes, like my youngest son was a triple sport athlete in high school, and so often anymore that's just not almost even an option for these kids because they're so overtrained by every sport. And particularly one of his sports was football, which, thinks that they own you in essence. And he was going to be going to college to play football. So the intensity of all of that, and people say, oh, there's no way that someone can even physically do all those workouts and trainings. Well, based on some really good input. My husband is a chiropractor, does functional neurology, a lot of brain work, a lot like what Dr. Lee does, and just some tweaks in performance and nutrition. And so here's a kid who can then even go to college and play two sports. Like those things that everybody says, well, you can't do that. Well, it's not that he's like this unbelievable gifted athlete like no other. It's, wait a minute, like it's these principles. So that's what Dr. Lee, you're able to do. It's a blend of that physical work and then the mindset piece. And that's why it just takes athletes in the realm of performance to a whole new level.
Right. And I feel like that's exactly what holds back the younger athletes as well, is not understanding that they have to develop in different ways, and not necessarily just physically. It's mentally, emotionally, also nutritionally as well. Like just people understanding when they're taking something in for a certain effect, like they're taking in like magnesium or calcium to help with muscle repair, things of that sort. It's just reinforcing that notion that you're doing the right thing over and over, day after day. You're always progressing, and you're getting that, I like to say, 1% better every day. Because eventually,
Yeah,
if you do that, you're at 100.
absolutely. That's why, for listeners, like having that conversation athletically with Dr. Lee or any of the other doctors at head to toe, the nutrition piece that you said, Dr. Lee, is so critical. A lot of times we recognize, okay, so yes, how do I eat? And there's a lot we can do with our food, but little tweaks like what the doctors can be talking to you about nutrition wise, supplementation wise, there's, again, you can mail order things from anywhere, but how do you know if that's even really in the right direction? Again, that youngest son of mine, so he goes off to college to play football, and he literally has a nutrition person, that guides the team, that I hate to say it, but is very old school and very traditional, that in football, it's all about the bulk. And it's not like a professional football player. Like sometimes, like, again, you look at some of them that are vegetarians, you look at some of them that, just eat so differently and do their supplements so differently. And literally in one semester off at college, it's like I could hardly even recognize my son anymore. He'd gained 50 pounds. Now, was that all good weight? And the first thing we did over Christmas was my husband tweaking some nutritional things and altering that, and getting accommodations so that he didn't have to just add bulk. But that's why, Dr. Lee, like what you're doing and working with the client is so invaluable.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's one thing about creating size, and then there's another thing about actually getting that size to communicate with itself so that you can use it to its fullest potential. And I feel like you're saying, the overtraining model, especially in football, they kind of go more towards the surface look of what things are supposed to look like rather than the performance aspect. And then just based on football, because you've got so many people going into the mold, you're eventually going to weed out people that aren't able to play professionally. But in my opinion, if they would train a little bit more efficiently, there'd probably be even more athletes that are that capable, like say like a Saquon Barkley or something like that.
Yeah, and what you guys are doing with, it's not just the performance piece. Like you guys are taking those same principles to all of the patients. That it's really, how do we maximize anyone coming into the clinic? And so it is that blend of the physical piece of it, but then this mindset and how you think, and then even the quality of the supplements that you take, or the things that you add on to your healthcare team, your healing team, and if anything, I think we've learned from COVID, as everybody's gone through all the intensity of this, part of the wake up call is, the best, defense against something like COVID, against these health issues, is a powerful offense. And
Right.
so what you guys are providing is that capability for patients, for the public, and your free resources. I mean, and I'm sure you post all of those. Like I'm absolutely impressed with what Dr. Annie and all of you as a team have created. Like you have unbelievable resources for your patients, but also for people that they can just access that. So, people listening, from a health perspective, empower yourself and use some of these kinds of resources that are available.
I mean,
Janice,
absolutely.
when it comes to one thought, Lee, on this, Janice, when it comes to these mindset mistakes, we've talked a lot about the opportunity of developing a powerful mindset, the opportunity of using kind of questions, of going deeper, of approaching things, as Lee was talking about, from a variety of different angles. But when you're thinking about maybe the top one or two mistakes that you see that people, when it comes to shifting mindset, or when it comes to developing a more powerful mindset, what's one or two things that you consistently see people get hung up on?
Well, the first one is that instantly we talk to ourselves in such a negative way. We would never say to others what we say to ourselves. So that's all mindset. I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. There's no way I can accomplish that. And when I say that we talk to ourselves, it's like half the time it's in our head, but those are the things that we are doing over and over and over again. We're convincing ourselves out of taking a certain action or doing something, health-wise. Oh, that's going to cost too much money. I can't do that. But yet you would do that for your animal. You would, the way we love our animals, we're not going to not take them to a vet to have something addressed. So it's like, just starting to catch yourself, so that really brings up the action I talk to a lot of people about is just your awareness, increasing your awareness of what you are saying to yourself. And then because you start to realize how much negativity we have in our lives, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like, how do you even just pivot that? So starting to say, wait a minute, cancel. Here's what I really mean. Or here's what I am going to now start to pivot to. So, it's called affirmations. I'm going to call those power statements. If we are typically saying, I can't do something, sometimes it's so far to the extreme to say, oh, well, I'm brilliant at that. I'm expert at that. So you almost have to find steps, so affirmations don't always have to say, I am fabulous at it. It's, I'm doing the things to gain the knowledge to make this change. And you notice the tone of that is so different than here's all the things I can't do.
Yeah, I think that when people start with affirmations, it can feel fake. It can feel inauthentic. It can feel like that it's a stretch. And to your point, one powerful way to pivot after conducting a self-audit and just that self-awareness. So I think your primary point, let me back up, because your primary point around self-awareness, it begins with that internal, just tune in to self-talk radio and find out what you're saying to yourself and notice the quality and the
right.
tenor and the emotional note of that. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it moving you forward? Is it holding you in place? Is it yeses or nos? Is it possible, impossible? That types of thing. And I think that's such a great point you bring up. And then finding a way to recognize a progress mindset, a growth mindset, and if it feels inauthentic to fully put yourself at that end state, to your point, a power position there is putting yourself as a proactive, as an intentional player who's making progress, who's taking the actions, who's doing the things necessary to get to that end goal.
Undies.
Right. It's like a step. Yeah, it's a step to a step.
Absolutely. Well, Janice, such powerful insights into how we can tap into more of our own power and use that as a force of good in our own lives, in the lives of the people that are around us. So if a person, if one of our listeners is wants to follow along, get more involved with what you're working on, what you're doing, just get more of this amazing perspective and wisdom you're putting out there, what's the best way for them to follow along or jump in?
It's things like, welcome to the power of Facebook. Again, myself, I have, obviously my individual account, but, it's things like, the project that you described, To Inspire Women. So it's the number 2, Inspire Women. We also have a website, toinspirewomen.com. A lot of times anymore, I think that just reach out. Very few people do it. We always launch this stuff out there and say, oh, by all means, just follow along or check in with me. And what I find is anymore, I think that we're almost better to say, wait a minute, like just reach out, even, through Messenger, or just reach out, through Google searching, because I just do work direct referral. Actually, I don't have companies out there, that I say, oh, I have other coaches or I train other people. It's just me and the work that I do. I'm at a very fortunate place and stage in my life that I only work by referral. So I'm happy though through Facebook, through To Inspire Women. I do money mindset, through Facebook, so people can often see my stuff there as well. So I'm happy if you need any of those, or anybody on, again, the patient base or the team needs any of that. I'm happy to connect with them.
Oh, I love it. We will get those links. We'll post those in the show notes. It's just always nice to know where a person can get more of this goodness that you're putting out there. And if absolutely, if you're listening to this and hearing Janice go through how she approaches things, if that resonates, reach out and just touch base. And again, it sounds, Janice, like if you're in terms of your practice and your coaching, it sounds like you're pretty full, but I'm sure you're also phenomenal with resources for people and other venues and angles for people to get into if they need additional help and you're not able to accommodate at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll send you a link as well. I do a lot of things collaboratively with others. There's a book coming out. I was talking again about the 100-year, sort of living to 100. There's a book that I've written, a chapter. It's called Codes of Longevity. And that's coming out right near Thanksgiving, actually. And, a collaborative group of practitioners. It's all about that living to 100 and beyond. So I can make sure I get you that link as well.
I would love it. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate you sharing and taking some of your time today to share with our audience and our listeners some really practical ways that they can get into becoming more aware of the internal dialogue and starting to make some positive changes towards shifting it in a new direction. So thank you so much. And we'd love to get to know you. It was really a great show.
Thanks for helping, so many people and having me be able to do a little bit of that through Annie, yourself, and the entire team.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks, everybody. Want to wrap this show. We will see you on the next episode. Until then, take care and know and remember that movement is the best medicine. Thanks, everybody.